Hello everyone, welcome back to the Vast and Ominous Comic Vault. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And we are broadcasting from the bunker. Eric, your first video.
It is.
In the bunker.
It is. Not first be in the house. We shot upstairs before.
Yeah, that's true. While we were waiting to get this whole thing set up. But what do you think of it, Eric?
It's great.
Isn't it exciting?
Yeah, it's super cool.
We are going to chat today about a comic series, about an Iron Man arc that we've been meaning to talk about forever.
We talked about doing it since at least before Iron Man 3 came out.
Yeah, I mean, like, years ago, before you were here, it's kind of odd and ironic that we're finally getting to this now. Demon in a Bottle, requested by the Day Ghost. Thanks to the Day Ghost, finally kind of kicking us into gear, making us finally talk about this.
Yeah.
Eric is, of course, a huge Iron Man fan. Iron Man is your favorite superhero.
Yeah, I've got it in the omnibus form.
And is Demon in a Bottle one of your favorite Iron Man stories? I mean, it's considered like one of the big ones, and a thing that like if people can name one, it's usually that one, or has been for a long time.
Both of the stories that everyone can name are in this book, and it's Demon in a Bottle and Doom Quest, which is at the end of this book. It's like 149, 150. Neither of those are favorites of mine. Like, I don't dislike them. Like, they're good, and I really enjoyed rereading it this time. But everything that this does well with the alcoholism thing, Dennis O'Neil does so much better.
Oh, interesting.
Like, if you want to read the Iron Man alcoholism thing, you want to go read the Dennis O'Neil stuff, because he has him relapse, and like he becomes like a homeless person and gives up iron. Like, he goes really far with the alcoholism thing.
So this kind of just establishes that idea in the first place.
And it also is, at least in the public eye, is where Iron Man kind of finds himself. Like, there's Stan Lee and an Archie Goodwin, and there's a lot of like nothing for like 100 issues. Not 100 issues, but like 80 issues.
Yeah.
Right before this is the Bill Manilow run, which I think is kind of underappreciated and pretty good. But like, what people think of as Iron Man kind of starts here after the Stan Lee and Archie Goodwin stuff. So it's really important. It establishes a lot of things that will be long-running with Tony's character and things like that, like the alcoholism and things like that. But like, it's really important and foundational.
That's how it read to me, where it was like, oh, I'm recognizing things that everybody talks about with Iron Man and that has informed extra media and stuff, but I wasn't sure, like, how... I haven't read a whole lot of Iron Man, so I assumed that, like you were talking about, there were probably things that built on this that were, you know, more complex and intriguing than this was. And, like, with so many things, there's important stuff, and then there's great stuff, and this is good, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I, for the time, it's the best stuff in this whole omnibus. In their first run, I think this, because their run starts at 116, like that to 129 is the best stuff in this, if only because after this, for some reason, they just stopped telling ongoing stories. Like, every issue is an individual story, like some kind of call back, but like, it's not that Marvel thing.
I was going to say, this read like real traditional Marvel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories weaving in and out of each other, and there's a lot of setup and payoff where we'll establish a conflict that won't really be affecting us for a while, and then it comes back.
We'll do like one page that's like setting up a subplot, and the next issue you do one page, and then like finally you get to that subplot like 3 issues later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real classic Marvel storytelling. This run, I think 115, we start at 120, or the trade starts at 120. 115 is John Romita's Jr.'s first issue, ever published issue.
Yeah.
So this whole run,
I knew it was real early. I wasn't sure if it was the first thing he ever did.
The 115, this one, is John Romita Jr.'s first published issue on anything, as an artist.
That's awesome.
We get first James Rhodes in this. So I started at 118, the trade starts at 120, I assume you started at 120?
Yes.
I think he appears in 118.
I was going to say, because he read like he was a pre-established character, but I couldn't
just
tell if he'd been
barely?
around for very long, yeah.
So 118, which has this classic cover, which is where I started reading, because that's where the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff starts. If you want to get like the whole scope, you have to start at 116. That's where Bethany Cave's introduced, and Spy Master's there, and we later found out Spy Master was working for Justin Hammer, but like, you can start at 120 because these are old comics that recap everything. But I start at 118 because that's where the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff starts. That's where Tony finds out that Nick Fury's buying everything, or S.H.I.E.L.D. is buying everything. But I think in these 2 issues, there's just one scene where Rhodey is a pilot. That's it. This is his introduction. Like,
wow.
Hey, Rhodey.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
So he's
I assumed he'd been there for a while, yeah.
Nope, 2 issues prior, and this is his only scene.
This read to me like an Iron Man primer. Like, if you're only familiar with, like I mostly am. I mean, obviously I've read Iron Man in Avengers comics and other things, but I haven't read a lot of solo Iron Man.
You did a video on 300 at one point.
That's true, and I forgot about that. And the only one I've really read is like maybe half a fraction. But if you're mostly just familiar with extra media Iron Man stuff, you read this and you get a sense of where a lot of that stuff comes from and what people were probably looking at. Like Demon in a Bottle, sort of like with a lot of stuff with Batman, like Long Halloween and stuff, is the one that's bandied around a lot. So you figure, okay, when we decided to make Iron Man movies, this is one of the 3 things we looked at.
And this is obviously influential on Iron Man 1 and 2.
Exactly, yeah.
And I actually think kind of influential on Iron Man 3.
I think it is too.
The thing about this and what I miss that we don't do as much with Iron Man
especially
anymore,
because of like the spy thriller tone.
That's what I was gonna say is Iron Man comics of this era. And for a long time are like James Bond movies on steroids.
Yeah.
Like Iron Man's
Which
not.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Iron Man's not like a stationary like New York-based superhero. Like Iron Man goes all over the world all the time, and he has grand adventures all over the place.
He's like a globetrotter.
And like we come up and he's unintentionally like super built for that. Like oftentimes just like, well, Stark International has a branch in China, so we're gonna go have an adventure in China. Like there's all these reasons for him to globe hop because he kind of has 3 lives. Like there's super adventures and there's inventor adventures and there's entrepreneur adventures, and like he's just all over the world, and it's very James Bondy, and you get that in Iron Man 3.
I think one of the reasons Demon in a Bottle is kind of fun to go back to is because it does all of those things. Like I don't think that's probably why it's remembered. I think it's just the alcohol thing. I think the reason people remember that is the name of it,
and they probably don't remember
covers.
All of this. They just remember 128 when he's drunk.
Yeah, and when he's having to go through rehab with Beth. It's really just about that one issue, I think. But when you read Demon in a Bottle as a thing, and it's several issues. It's like what 7 or 8 issues.
It's 8 issues. We start at 20. It's 10 issues. We start at 18, like I did.
Yeah.
I think. Well, yeah, I guess it's 9 issues because I the trade stops at 128. I think it should include 129 because it resolves the last plot threads of the story.
Yeah, no, you need that. You need the Nick Fury stuff.
It's
and
weird
I think that
the
resolves a
trade
little too easily, but it needs to be
does.
there. Yeah, because because you kind of just. If you don't read that, you just assume that probably goes on forever, and that okay, this is just the first leg of a much long. It's really not. That's resolved pretty quickly.
It immediately resolves.
And then he and Nick Fury are good again, and now they have to deal with some other thing.
Yeah, the Dreadnoughts. But this is the thing that I think a lot of people have when they go back to older comics that are major stories. With the exception of maybe Dark Phoenix Saga, which is genuinely like an 11-part story or however long that is.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the big stories you hear about, like the Kree Skrull War, if you try and go read the Kree Skrull War, the Kree Skrull War is like 2 issues. That's like a 12-issue trade, because it's all of the stuff leading up to it, because we didn't write in arcs. They were just ongoing stories, so when you jump in at 120, you're jumping in the middle of a story, and like, Demon in the Bottle is just one chapter in like the ongoing Iron Man narrative.
Yeah.
This isn't Demon in the Bottle, it's not an arc. It's not the Demon in the Bottle
sort
arc.
of make a case for it, because like, when you read that first Namor issue in the story, he is drinking and he is starting to kind of crawl into the bottle a little bit, but he's not like drunk all the time, and it's kind of just setting that up.
And I love how subtle that is.
Yeah, I do too.
That he gradually drinks more and more and more. I think that's great. I think that's really well done, like monthly comics.
But we didn't do as many like 6, 8, 12-issue arcs back then like that. It was kind of more organic.
And like the Namor stuff doesn't play into the later stuff, and like it's old comics. Like the important things from Namor is like Justin Hammer messing with his armor.
Well, yeah, because I mean that it does establish that, and that is going to be important later. So I mean, it's all interconnected, and it is nice to read all of that. Like if you just read 128, you kind of miss all of the all the stuff that's building to Iron Man losing himself, and so you kind of want to experience all the stress. Like he's just got all this constant piling stress on top of himself, and if you see all of that physical and emotional stress, internal and external conflict, It does more or less read like one, full story beginning, middle to end, but it sort of works out that way on accident.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it was supposed to be that way. I want to say in Marvel The Untold Story, there's a period of Marvel where the editors decide no ongoing stories, and I think that's what happens after
Really?
Deem the Bottle. That's the only thing I can guess, because all of a sudden they just stopped doing that. But the way Marvel Comics were written, theoretically it would just keep going, like it wouldn't resolve.
Yeah, this is just like Spider-Man or Daredevil.
Yeah, like.
I mean, Stan Lee days, like.
Yeah, there's a mini climax to Deem the Bottle, but like a lot of this where they kept going and things like that.
Yeah. And this is we haven't nailed down a date. This is what
79, I think.
I was gonna say late 70s, early 80s.
It doesn't have a date on there. I'm pretty sure it's 79. I think it's listed in the beginning. Yes, 79 is 18. So yeah, this is all 79.
But yeah, I was just surprised by the sheer number of like Iron Man things that have become like known later that are kind of in their infancy here. So like Justin Hammer, obviously completely different thing than he is.
And
in
introduced
Iron Man
you.
2.
This is his introduction.
Yeah,
and also a
exactly.
James Bond villain.
Yeah,
Like very clearly.
no, I was going to
James
say
Bond
totally a James Bond villain.
Visually based on Peter Cushing.
He looks like Peter Cushing.
And it wasn't until this reading, just randomly reading, I was like, oh, he's Justin Hammer because he's in Hammer horror movies. Like, oh, yes, of course.
Oh,
and I've never
interesting.
thought about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's based on Peter Cushing, and he's great. I think he's one of the best ideas in superhero comics, where he's the guy that funds all the supervillains. How do supervillains keep getting technology if they keep losing? And he funds them for, I think it's 50% kind of the profits of their petty crimes.
Yeah, there's a logic there that makes it all make a lot more sense and makes it easier to take seriously, but it also makes it kind of more fun.
Yeah, he's a great explanation for contrivances within superhero stories.
And then he's going to take all of those BC list villains and throw them all at Iron Man at the same time, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, which is a great action. Actually, we get the porcupine.
Yeah, there's some really weird ones, just super silly villains in this that I'd never heard of before.
And I'm sure none of them were invented. They're all existing Marvel characters.
Yeah, that whole thing's hilarious. But yeah, I want to go back to the point that this is like traditional superhero like stuff, but also spy thriller, but also espionage all at the same time. And it's really fun reading all that in one bag, just because there's so much diversity of storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's never the same thing issue to issue, but it also doesn't read inconsistent.
Well, and I love that it keeps changing. Like we have a whole issue where Tony doesn't have his armor.
Yeah.
And then we've got
and he gets trained by Captain America, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's great. That I don't think that ever gets brought up again. I think we'll just go back to treating Tony Stark like he doesn't know how to fight.
But it's a lot of fun thinking about what happens decades and decades later with those characters. That they're going to go up against each other in Civil War and everything, and he can physically fight because Captain America taught him how. I wish we had played with that a little bit more, because obviously they're not ideologically at odds yet. And also it's important to note that he does have a secret identity, and I'm so not used to that with Iron Man, and it kind of got in the way a little bit, I thought, with this story. I kept wanting this to be, especially because it felt so much like a primer, I wanted this story to end with I Am Iron Man. Like this felt like the place to do it.
I like Iron Man's secret identity. I think it gives him a lot of things that other people's secret identities don't. The big one is his involvement in the Avengers.
Sure.
Where the Avengers will talk crap on Iron Man in front of Tony Stark, or they'll talk bad about Tony Stark in front of Iron Man, and he just can't say anything, and that happens a lot. A lot of employees will be like, "Yeah, our boss sucks, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I hate that, Tony Stark." I think all of that's a lot of fun. Just none of it works in the serious mold that we're doing comics now. If we're still doing comics like this,
That's
I think
true.
we can still get away with that.
Well, and this feels very much like you said a mold, like that's the formula for back then. It just feels like that's how we did comics in these kinds of stories at that time. And so the kind of Shakespearean notion, the mistaken identity thing, we wanted that in as many kinds of stories as we could get it in.
Tony's not outed and stays out till the mid-2000s.
Is it that long?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, it's...
Yeah, I mean, I'm just talking about what I'm used to with this character, obviously.
And
it works better here than with some other things. I never liked it with Thor. it works a lot better with Iron Man.
That's a thing that I don't like. A lot of people that came into Iron Man with the movies is like, it's like, well, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have a secret identity anymore. It like the character was fine. I'm like, yeah, he does, but you are missing something. I do think there's an essential part of that character that we no longer have.
Or even that inherently he's a superhero without a secret identity. That like that's what makes him interesting. And in the movies, that's true, but he wasn't that until then.
No, and this is obviously a
and I knew that. I'm just so used to that. Is all I'm saying.
And this is obviously a very different character than what Robert Downey Jr. does.
Absolutely.
The big thing that we get here, and I think starts here. I don't think this is earlier, but I could be wrong.
Or he's really self-absorbed, but it's not the same sort of narcissism.
Tony Stark's...
He is self-destructive.
Yes.
There's that.
So Tony Stark obviously has an addictive personality, which is a thing that I think is interesting in... later we will go back and force the alcoholism genetic thing. Where like Tony's dad was a drunk, and therefore Tony's a drunk. Here, and what I think it should be with Tony Stark... Like, obviously that does play into people being alcoholics.
It just comes from pressure.
And he has an addictive personality. He can't do things in small doses. We'll play with this later. He'll get addicted to being in the armor. And, like, Tony Stark is just an addictive person. It's not about genetics. It's not about upbringing. It's about him as a man.
And if he didn't have all those stressors, that would probably never happen to him. I was reminded, obviously this is way later, but, like, I was reminded a little bit of Nightfall reading this, where it's like, where do you find that out when you have that much pressure on you? When you push yourself too hard and you're trying to do too much at once and you have, like, everything coming down on you from all these different places, like what is your release, and how do you keep from not crumbling? And alcoholism is his, and I really like that it isn't just we snap our fingers and go, let's give him some kind of a new personal flaw. Like this comes from a place, and it
makes organic sense.
I appreciate that it comes from a situational place, that he's not just again, well, let's just have him have some weird thing, some problem, let's roll a d20. Oh, he's an alcoholic now. It's the situation, like, this is a guy who is terrified he's going to lose everything, and so he's not an unsympathetic drunk.
Well, and I think it's topical when this comes out. I think this is when we're finally, like, really talking about alcoholism as a thing, because the 60s, obviously, everyone's alcoholic. But it's not exactly ripped from the headlines, but like we're dealing with that and making it work with the Marvel characters.
And we're starting to do that with a lot of other comics with drugs and different things as well.
Green Lantern, Green Arrow predates this.
That was the first thing that came to Denny O'Neil.
Yeah,
was the first thing that came to
well, and the Spider-Man drug issue.
Right.
But yeah, the other big thing that we get with Tony in this, I think, is established here. I might be wrong. It might be earlier. But it's really predominant here, and it will stay predominant for the rest of this character's history. That is in the movies, but it's different. I think in the comics, especially here, it's a more masculine thing, whereas in the movies, it's a more intellectual thing, which is Tony Stark doesn't ask for help. Tony Stark can't ask for help, and he compartmentalizes, and he doesn't tell people things he should, and he pushes people away unintentionally. In the movie, it's kind of I'm smarter than you, so you can't help. Here, it feels very prideful. Tony Stark just... I have to deal with this. It is my problem.
Like
I will fix it
if I don't fix it.
Yeah, which is the big...
And he's not able to get over this until he does ask for help.
Yeah, specifically with the alcoholism. Like, he needs his friends to help him through alcoholism, which I think is a strong, powerful message that is done well for late 70s comics.
Yeah, and in a book that has a lot of really silly stuff in it. It's really impressive how those things are kind of balanced. Where we've got some really silly, hokey superhero action at the same time as we're dealing with some kind of heavy issues. Now, as organic as the alcoholism is handled and as subtle as it's introduced, the one issue where we finally break down and deal with it does read like a very special issue of Iron Man, right?
It does. It resolves very easily and very quickly, which is why I say go read the Dennis O'Neil stuff, because he has a 50-issue run that's basically all about Tony's alcoholism.
But it's handled more maturely than I would expect in what essentially arguably reads like, so many comics at this time. It's aimed at kids and it's not aimed at kids, right? We're expecting that the primary audience for this is children, so we're dealing with this really heavy issue knowing that that's our audience. So at the same time as we've got just some of the hokiest supervillains you've ever seen, and we're like, we've got that issue in the casino,
which I love.
I know it's great. A lot of that action's awesome.
It's called Casino Fatale, which is an amazing title.
Yeah.
It's
and again, it sounds like a James Bond thing.
Well, yeah, because Casino Royale, like they're clearly riffing. And what's interesting is that wasn't a movie. Like that's clearly a book reference.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was a comedy movie.
That's a good point. Yeah.
No, and I love that issue with Whiplash and the Melter and Blizzard.
But relatively maturely handled. Like, I appreciate that love doesn't save the day.
Yeah,
I appreciate that,
and that he has to do it.
He is helped by a woman that he's attracted to, but it's not like a romance happens at the same time. Like, I think they're starting in a romance, be involved, but it isn't like we start making out and suddenly everything's fine. It's not that whole thing. It isn't. It's that she's his friend, not his lover, that makes the difference.
And I also think it's important that like if you go read this issue, it's a very special issue, and it's kind of it's a little hokey. It's 70s comics, but unlike
we fix everything with a montage, basically. Although I say that he almost goes back, which is nice, and then he doesn't. But it is nice that the potential for relapse is there. I would buy a relapse later. You say that happens, I would buy that happen.
And he relapses hard.
It doesn't feel like he's necessarily over this.
But he, I really like that, unlike the Stan Lee drug issues, which we reviewed, where it's very clear Stan Lee has never taken drugs, doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. Like, it's just like, hey kids, don't do drugs, they're bad. I don't necessarily think either of them are alcoholics, but, like, they looked into it.
This doesn't read like a PSA as much as that did.
No, and the important thing, like you said, is it's not like love conquers all. It's not just like if you have friends, you won't need to drink. It's very important that the final, like, moment is her saying, I can't do this for you. You have to do this. Mm-hmm. Because, like, at the end of the day, like, support is very helpful, but it still comes down to you. And I think that's really strong that's there.
You need somebody to help you make that leap in the first place, and to give you a reason to keep going, to remind you that people care and that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. But it is a decision that you have to make on your own. And I also liked her background with her ex-husband. I do too. And that plays in the later stuff, actually. Does it? Yeah, he's not dead, I think, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. I liked the idea that she wasn't mature to handle it right in the first place, and she just let him go on his own, and tragically it allegedly led to his death. Mm-hmm. And she says, "I'm not going to let that happen to you, Tony Stark, and I'm gonna do everything I can to help you, but you are going to have to do this." And the montage is powerful enough, right? I mean, it's kind of a one-page montage, but I love those intense shots of Tony, like, kind of screaming for a drink and her refusing to give it to him, and she basically creates his own personal rehab program for him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I did kind of wonder why she didn't just take him to rehab. I don't know if that's as popular yet. Yeah, maybe not. Because I know when Stephen King writes The Shining, he doesn't go to AA because Stephen King's not even thinking about AA yet. Sure. And that's the big thing with Dr. Sleep when he wrote the book that he wanted to, like, go back on was Danny goes to AA. Yeah. And he also has that in the miniseries that Jack goes to AA. Because that's a thing now. And, and so I don't know if that's super prevalent here. But we will do that later, and he is Captain Marvel's sponsor. I don't know if you know that. Captain Marvel's also an alcoholic, and Tony is her sponsor. It's difficult to put yourself, obviously, in the time and place when you didn't live it. Mm-hmm. You know, and I wondered about that, but I wasn't totally sure. I'm sure it existed, but I don't know if it's as prevalent. But later on, we will establish he does go to AA, and he's continuing to go to AA. Like, in Fractions Run, there's a whole issue... I think it's 500.1 is just Tony in an AA meeting, because the people at Alcoholics will tell you, like, you remain an alcoholic even if you don't, and you stay in AA. Yeah. Because your life is always going to have stress and trouble, and, like, you need that community.
So we will later do that. We don't do it here, but we do later say Tony is an A.
So I like the whole Shield scenario, and I like and I like the dealing with Hammer and Shield at the same time scenario, especially because at first there's reason to think that they might be connected, and then they're two totally different things. Where it's like, oh, that's not the military. That's this other corporation that's trying to get their hands on vibranium, and
Well, that's Roxxon.
I thought that was also connected to Hammer. Is that even like a third thing?
I don't think that's connected to Hammer. I think that's just for those 2 issues.
Oh,
That's
really?
Roxxon.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I thought that was... Okay, so that's less connected than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
No.
He just has a lot of things coming down on him.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yep.
Which is great. I mean, it's just...
And Hammer makes him kill that guy, the foreign
It's just
dignitary.
naturally good drama. Yes, we need to talk about that.
Which is
It's
amazing
wonderful.
superhero comics where he's just like, trust me, I didn't do it. And the cop's like, well, you've never been wrong before.
The mistake I think Tony Stark makes there, and I don't think he really has to pay for it, we just don't really talk about it, is maybe he shouldn't be going around in the armor if it's malfunctioning. Like, he puts it through its paces, he does kind of the danger room thing with it, and he's like, oh, well, it seems fine, so I'll just keep using it. But if I were him, I think I would take it off for a while until I was totally sure that it wasn't malfunctioning anymore.
Yep. No, I think all of that is very, like, comic book funny. And there's quite a few things like that in this.
But it's also quite a surprise if you don't see it coming.
Yeah.
Where he's talking to that dignitary that's got that
And I love his face right after he does it. Like, it's so...
broken English.
It's so somber.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's just... It's real, like, comic booky, like, melodrama. Like, oh, no!
I love how expressive Iron Man's face can be when it really only has one expression.
Yeah, and you have to do that. I forget who does it when Archie Goodwin's writing, but there's an artist there, I forget who the artist is, but he does that, and he was the first major artist to do that, and people were like, apparently people didn't like it.
Does it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's
but like you go back there, they're just so powerful. They're such powerful faces, like because there's so much emotion going on there. No, it's fine. It's like Spider-Man's eyes moving.
Well, and I love it. I like that kind of comic absurdity, where it doesn't really make sense, but it's there's enough of an internal logic to the rest of the piece that you can kind of get away with it. I like those visual things that just are impossible, that don't make sense.
I mean, every superhero's white pupils.
Yeah.
Like it's
a stylistic choice.
Yeah,
It's a visual stylistic choice.
It's for us, the audience. It's not necessarily existing in universe.
I also think there's a novelty to being able to see Tony Stark's eyes.
Yeah.
Behind the Iron Man armor, which I'm just not used to.
There is I love that he's flying around without, like, because there's things that come down over his mouth and eyes, which means we're not just... Because we do this with more modern Iron Man comics, where, like, he's got, like, the slits, but we'll zoom in and see his eyes.
Yeah.
There's no HUD there. There's no screen.
No, he's just looking out.
He's just looking out of an iron mask, and I think that's awesome. Like, you could not get away with that now.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's like the Mandalorian. Like, if he wanted to look at something far away, he would like need.
Exactly.
Need a telescope or something. Yeah.
Scott Lang's in this.
Yeah.
He looks like Arcade. He looks.
Does he?
Yeah,
I didn't really think of that.
Yeah. It was really distracting to me. He also threatened
momentarily.
someone.
I was like, oh, I forgot Scott Lang went back this far.
And he's created by Michelini. He's not created here. Michelini creates him over in Avengers, but it's right around this time. I mean, he looks just like Arcade.
He does. Okay, that's true. I didn't think of that.
Scott Lang looks just like Arcade. But also on this page,
he's got that curly hair and
is a thing that I don't think is appropriate for superhero comics.
What's that?
So he goes into prison. I really like that scene. He goes into, I think it's Whiplash. Yeah, it's Whiplash's prison cell, and he grows big, and he says, tell me everything you know about a man named Hammer, or I'm going to break something you'll have a lot of trouble putting a cast on.
And
that's pretty intense for a kid's book.
It is, and there's a little bit of innuendo here and there.
There's quite a bit of innuendo. Tony Stark sleeps around.
Yeah. And they do it all off panel, and they try to be as subtle about it as they can for the kids that are reading, but it's so obvious what's going on.
There's one in the casino issue where I was like, oh man, like they're doing that. But I like that. Like, I miss that. It's that playing to both audiences.
Yeah.
You understand why both kids and college students were reading Marvel.
Yeah, and it works on different levels.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to go back to that. This whole going back.
That's what I loved about Simonson 4. That you can get away with the crazy stuff like Frog Thor, but then there's also so much like pathos.
Rereading this stuff it was just like going back to like a warm blanket. Where I'm just like, oh yeah, superhero comics used to be like this, and I wish they would go back to
You
this.
said that immediately after you read it. You were like, oh, I just want to immerse myself in this stuff again.
There's a lot of really silly things in this that I really appreciate. Like, we're just so self-aware now, and I hate it.
Yep.
Like, the Avengers are just hanging out on their couch in full costume.
We don't have to talk
and
about
referring
it.
to each other in code name.
Yeah.
And I think that's hilarious, because that's what happens in a superhero comic.
These days, when superheroes meet each other for the first time, they can't go 5 minutes without finding out each other's identities. Like, they're gonna know right away.
Well, except that nobody knows that Tony Stark's Iron Man.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
These days.
Yeah. That was a thing that I had to adjust to here, where I was like, oh yeah, that's right. The Avengers don't know that he's like, they've been Avengers for that long, and they don't know his secret identity.
And later in O'Neill's run, when Rhodey takes over as Iron Man, they don't know it's a different guy.
Yeah.
Which I think he brings up in Secret Wars, when we reviewed Secret Wars. I think Rhodey talks about, like, nobody knows I'm not the other Iron Man, and I'm just a guy in a
Which
suit.
I didn't know until I read Secret Wars.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
But
speaking of the Avengers, can we talk about the Jarvis thing?
Yeah.
Because I think that's wonderfully well handled.
I do too. That he's just done.
Yeah. He freaks out on Jarvis for, as he says, kind of no good reason, because he's just at his wit's end, and he's drinking too much, and he loses it on Jarvis, and Jarvis says, "Yeah, you know what, I'm done," and he just quits. And what I love about it is he gets his job back. Like, I thought it could have maybe gone a few issues where, like, he loses his job and he's not there for a while and the Avengers have to deal with it and there's fallout and stuff. But what I really like about it is it's still, like, massive actions and consequences, because it all wraps right back around to what the main conflict has been since the beginning with the S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, where this felt like classic Stan Lee stuff to me. This felt like what Stan Lee would do if this was in a Spider-Man comic, or an Avengers comic, I guess, where Jarvis sells his 2 pieces of stock he has in Stark International, and when he and Tony make up, he tries to get it back, but he can't, because he sold it to a loan shark that's playing dirty pool with him, and who manages to get it, of course, but Nick Fury, and those are, of course, going to be the controlling shares. I love that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's set up
great.
Like way earlier, a couple issues earlier. He's like, well, as long as he has those 2 shares.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So that's all.
And I love
that's
that's what makes Tony almost relapse. Because he thinks he's getting his life back together. He's like, oh no, it's not going to be okay. When he's
and he causes it.
Yeah.
He does it to himself.
Yeah. I also love that Jarvis is like the consummate butler, where he's like, look, I expect it to be treated like dirt every now and again, but you've been doing it a lot lately, and I'm done.
You've hit your quota. You've hit your threshold.
He also drinks Jack Powers, which I think is amusing.
Yeah.
As opposed to Jack Daniels.
So that was funny.
You read it on Marvel Unlimited.
I
yes?
did.
When Jarvis puts his letter, is it like this or is it with text?
No, you don't see the.
Okay.
You're not able to read it.
So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure all subsequent reprints of this issue are like this. The actual letter is contained in the back.
Oh, okay.
Because someone put a letter that is actually the resignation letter from a Marvel staffer. They did it as a jab.
I read about that in Marvel the Untold Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can actually read the letter here in the back, and then there's also a. This is from a later issue of Iron Man where they're like, "We are really sorry. That was not. We didn't realize what that was. Like that. And I think they frame it as like the audience didn't know, or like a lot of the audiences were confused because the letter didn't make sense.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I forgot about it.
Yes, and the letter doesn't make sense because it's not about Tony Stark and the Avengers. But no, I love that the Avengers are involved because he's a consummate Avenger, and Jarvis is actually, I feel like, an essential missing piece of the cinematic Avengers.
Yeah.
He's different than Alfred. Like, he's more of a butler. Where, like, Alfred's not really a butler, right? Like, he's Batman's dad that cleans up after him.
Yeah. And he can do anything.
Yeah.
He's a mechanic, and
and Jarvis is just a butler, but he's also like a guy with like a personality. I like Jarvis.
Well, and I guess like Alfred, he's kind of the voice of reason sometimes. And he's he's kind of the heart of the group, and maybe that's kind of what you're missing with not having him in the movies, right?
I will say that so in the drunk issue with we see Tony do some like really ridiculous things like smashing through the window and be like, oh, I forgot to close that window because he's drunk, and then he like lifts
and he
up,
tries to save people,
and he lifts up the train. They're like, no, wait, don't do it. He's like, no, I'm Iron Man, I can do it. He's just Barney from The Simpsons. Hey, everybody, watch me! Oh no! But
you're just suspecting some kid off the side to go ha ha.
But then when he goes to deal with the loan shark, he does it like I would assume he would if he was drunk, where he just like stumbles in and just starts breaking things. And he's like, "Now you listen here, buddy. You're gonna give that stock back because this is dirty pool, and I'm gonna report you to the vet. Yeah, well, he
just strong arms him and he breaks that was over the top. I thought he breaks everything in the room.
I do too, and that's an issue I actually have with Armor Wars, which is the other story everyone knows.
I was going to mention Armor Wars. I was like, no, I've heard of that. I've heard of that one. I've never read it.
And that's also Michelangelo and Light, and that's their second run.
Okay.
But in that one, he goes around. Everyone's like, Tony Stark's going too far, and he's like, I'm going too far. And I don't think he is. It reads kind of like traditional superhero comics. Like, I'm not actually sure he's going too far in certain cases. And that.
But with this, you're like, whoa!
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not worse than this. But then this is treated as reasonable and rational.
Yeah.
Even in the heightened superhero comic, I think this is a little far.
It's going too far. It's treated rational because he's in the right.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that seems really funny. Just thinking, because I feel like if you did it now, it would be one thing. Like, he'd pick up something heavy, like there's a statue or something, like bend it, and it'd be intimidating. But
he's just making a point.
Ruins this man's entire office. He just...
No, that is Iron Man is played by Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Is what that is.
Yeah. No, it's... Michael Keaton could have been Iron Man. This Iron Man.
Yeah.
And it would have made more sense than Bruce Wayne, because like you had the whole Howard Hughes thing, and like there's more for him to latch onto with what he wants to do with that kind of character, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Just inherently on the page.
I was making that as a joke, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think he would have been a great Iron Man. I also like the electrocutes this guy. Which I also thought was a little far, but then they say that he's fine. So that makes it okay.
Yeah, I liked it. So the thing we could do in comics back then that's harder to do now because it feels hokier is you'd have, I guess you can do it with internal monologue, but you'd have thought balloons where a person would just explain why everything's okay, or explain how they're getting away with something. So he's like, I'm pretty sure that this is not going to kill him. Like the amount of current in this room, I think we're going to be okay.
So he pours water all over the floor, breaks the lamp, and electrocutes this bad guy. And then when he leaves, he goes, the house current won't do that punk any permanent damage, but it should keep him out for a while. It's fine. I mean, this is the Human Torch makes no sense as a superhero, right? Like, he can't help anything. But he just goes around shooting people, and it's fine. Like, they're fine. Like, he's not melting their flesh.
What bogs down, there's two big things that bog down stuff from this period, and I don't mean to harp on this every time we go back to something from this period, so I'll just make this point very briefly. But I felt it particularly more here than I have in other things we've reviewed from this period more recently. Two big things. One is, again, in internal monologue with thought balloons and like a third-person omniscient exposition where there's just so much text that's unnecessary. Where
it's a lot less text than Secret Wars.
It is,
or
and it's also more
ever wrote.
meaningful than a lot of what's in Secret Wars. But comics back then couldn't decide if they wanted to be a novel or not, and sometimes, and so that was in some places kind of frustrating for me here, because I was like, well, I feel like I could skip some of this, and then I would read it and I would go, okay, like, that's some nice prose, but I don't need it. It's right there already. Like, it feels redundant is what I'm saying. But the bigger issue is some recapping. There's one issue in particular that spends like almost 4 full pages recapping what you just read in a previous issue, and it's the follow-up issue. It's not even like a new story arc starts. It's like the second part of a story, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm rereading everything I just did. We're really inconsistent with this arc about when we feel like we need recapping and when
Yeah, because there's one part where and I want to say it's this. Yeah, it's this one. So 126, which is right after Tony killed that guy. We go through everything that's happened in this entire arc up to this point.
Yeah.
Like, it is a long recap. But then the next issue, we recap nothing. We just pick up right where we left off.
I don't know why that's there.
But I thought most of the recapping was pretty well handled.
Except for that.
Except for that one.
Yeah.
This one just starts with Iron Man shooting people.
And I also forgot, we also do a whole issue where we just go back and recap the origin.
Yes.
And
which I think is the first time we do that since Origin.
It's pretty well done.
It is.
And that's part of why I say this feels like a primer. Like, I think this is a really good place to start just for Iron Man as a character.
If you have the right historical perspective and can read 70s comics.
Yeah.
That's always the caveat with these things. Very few things from this era can you just read cold.
But I think it happens by accident, but it really reads like this is a jumping on point, right?
Well,
like,
and
this is not necessarily it's for people that like Iron Man already, but you also don't have to. And it's like, not only does it introduce a bunch of elements that become major Iron Man elements, but surprisingly feels the need to go back to the beginning in case you don't know about that. It's really it's just kind of lucky. It's kind of a nice happenstance.
And that issue actually sets up a thing, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but Iron Man walks off in a trench coat at the end of that, which is obviously hilarious and amazing. He walks off in full armor, but in a trench coat. There's a later issue in this run where they continue that story and show how he meets Rhodey. So Rhodey is introduced in 118, but they play him like they've been friends since Nam.
Right. Which is why I assumed he was there already.
Yeah. I think part of the Iron Man primer thing comes from... So Michelin and Layton come on this. And I don't know if you notice the credits, they're always listed as co-plotters.
Yes.
Which is very interesting because Layton's the inker, not the artist.
Yeah.
Layton loves Iron Man. But Layton has always explained it as like, yeah, I really liked early Iron Man, like Iron Man's really bad. But I saw the potential. So I think this is, and Michelin kind of just didn't care, but like just wanted work and wanted to do the best work he could, and was jazzed because his friend was jazzed. So I think part of that is, this is Layton...
So he got to be more involved.
Yeah, so this is Layton coming onto the book and going, I want to do this with Iron Man, this with Iron Man, this is what's cool about Iron Man. So like, I think unintentionally they're doing that just because he's getting to play with all the toys now.
Okay.
I will...
Yeah, it does read like kind of crazy random happenstance, but I kind of appreciated it as, again, not a big Iron Man person, but also I think that's part of that's part of where I get off saying that I think you could have made those movies and only read this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it works better because these are comic books, not an arc. It is not the... If this came out now and it was Demon and Bottle Part 1 through 8, you'd be like, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not supposed to be a big story, so like it's okay that like one issue is this story, and then we'll do these two issues in a hotel, and
it kind of runs off with itself in random places.
Yeah, because it's telling monthly stories. It's not telling yearly stories. This is not This is not trying to be a movie.
Yeah, because of that, it doesn't read great as a piece. Like when I go back and read stuff like this, I kind of need 3 or 4 sittings. I don't know about you. I don't tend to sit down and read all of this together.
I blew through all of this.
Did you really? I did this in 2 or 3 days.
I think they read fast. I think I did it in 2 sittings, but it was more just like I didn't have time for the first thing. Yeah. But like I think they read fast. It also helps that they're 16-page issues, not 20-page issues, or even 18-page issues. These are 16-page issues. So that helps them read fast too. I think it's incredibly not wordy for the time period. I think they read really like.
You're absolutely right. If you go back and compare this to Simonson, like
or Claremont, or I think Miller's pretty reserved, and he's coming on the Daredevil right around here.
Oh yeah, no, he absolutely is. Yeah.
But he's even more wordier than he will be. Well, I guess he's really wordy in Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns is a lot of words. It's like a wall of text at points. I have given that book to people, and they're intimidated because it's the 16-panel grid, and there's words in all of them, and they're like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
But no, I think if you're primed for 70s comics but just haven't read Iron Man, this is a great starting point. And I've always said the really nice thing about Iron Man, a lot of Marvel characters don't have. Like when you look at Captain America, like there's like a lot of like misses, and you're like, okay, well you read this run, and then there's like 3 years where like nothing good's there, and then Steve Englehart comes on, and then there's kind of not, it's real spotty, and then Mark Grunwald comes on, and like that run's pretty good, but like it keeps going. Like a lot of Marvel characters have that. Even Spider-Man has that.
Yep.
Like I think it's 200s, like 250. Like there's a point there where like they rotate writers, and like it's just it's not working. I think this is what Marv Wolfman's writing it. I think his run's not great, or it's somebody in there. That's O'Neill, I think maybe isn't good. But Iron Man from 115 to 315, with a small gap of 10 issues of fill-ins, is solid comics. You go from Michelini into Dennis O'Neill.
And does it read pretty consistent, where it's like, and I'm still reading about the same guy?
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
building on the adventures.
Well, yeah, because Dennis O'Neill's super building on this, and then Michelini and Layton come back, and they're building on O'Neill, but they're also kind of getting rid of things they don't like about what O'Neill did.
So you're
and
saying
back
it's
to things
almost
they like.
200 solid issues.
It's like 200 solid issues. There's a slight period between O'Neill and McLean Layton coming back where he leaves and they don't have a solid writer for a couple of issues, and then when they leave, John Byrne comes on and Romita Jr. comes back, and it's some of my favorite Iron Man art because it's that period of Romita Jr. It's around like. It's a little before Clone Saga. It's around Now Without Fear, where he's a little bit more clunky and a little bit more stylized. He'll get a little bit firmer with his art later.
Interesting.
But I love that art. And then Kaminsky comes on. Kaminsky's run is super underappreciated, but that's where War Machine comes from. And this is the beginning of if you like this, you can just keep reading.
I did find myself curious to continue, and I may, because you just passed that Fury issue.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it kind of slows down a bit. You do get other stuff you get in this run that's really cool and important. Is we introduce the I always want to call them variant, but they're not. The specialty armors. Like this is the introduction of the space armor and the deep sea armor,
cool.
and doing all of that. But like honestly, if you want to read Iron Man for this period, I recommend the Dennis O'Neill run more than this stuff. Like this stuff is good, solid superhero comics, but like Dennis O'Neill stuff does some great things. But yeah, it's just good comics, right? Like, and that's the thing is, this isn't great literature. It's not going to set the world on fire, but it's darn good superhero comics.
Well, and when I say it's a good, like, you're right, you need to be primed for 70s comics, but when I say it's a good jumping on point to go back to Iron Man, I mean to see how comic book Iron Man is different from movie Iron Man. Like, if you want to know where this stuff came from and how he differs from the reinterpretation,
because he's not snarky here.
No, he's not.
He's a little jokey as Iron Man, but all superheroes were.
Yeah.
Like, Batman was also making jokes at this point in time.
He's not sarcastic, and he's not out of touch.
No, he's hip and cool. He's James Bond.
Yeah. That's the biggest difference, is that movie Tony Stark is eccentric. This guy's not eccentric.
No, he just has trouble asking for help and talking about his feelings. Like, it's a much more masculine character.
That's true.
He is sensitive,
like,
but he doesn't know it.
Masculine.
Yeah. He this guy doesn't stop and ask for directions.
And that's worthwhile because a lot of people are like that. Like, a lot of people can relate to that, obviously.
And we have since made him much more neurotic and like navel-gazing. And so some of that's made for compelling storytelling, but it's not necessarily.
I think that's a good take too.
Yeah, I'm ready for this Tony Stark to come back.
The point you always, and I don't know how it ever could, but I mean, he's dead now. Spoiler alert. But I mean, like, if you ever rebooted in some way, I guess, But I don't know. Like, where would you do it? Or do you just mean in comics?
I mean comics.
Yeah.
I mean comics. No. I have no problem with the cinematic Iron Man as a separate take on that character.
Okay,
it's not this character, but it's in the ballpark. It's a good adaptation, but it is an adaptation. It is not this character. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for the hyper confident, almost to a fault Tony Stark to come back.
I appreciate that in the same way I always appreciated Nolan's Batman, where like it's not comic Batman, but like it's valid, and I'm not reading exactly the same. I'm not looking at exactly the same thing I did in the comics, so it gives me something new.
And it's Nolan's take, whereas the films are very much like Robert Downey Jr.'s take on that character, and that's great and that's valid. But no, in the comics,
But you're saying, why did we have to transform him into movie Iron Man in the comics?
Well, even before that, we do that a little bit. We just this Tony Stark doesn't exactly exist anymore, and he is much more jokey. Like that is the big takeaway from the movies. But he's also more. I don't know. Maybe it's just where we are, but like Tony Stark has to apologize for being interested in women, and in this. and usually throughout Iron Man for a long time, he's a great employer. His employees stand by Tony Stark because he is a good employer. He's not the head of like a major corporation that just doesn't care about the people on the floor. He does because he's not real. He can be that. And so much now we have to make Tony Stark be like ignorant of other people's feelings and like not considerate of like it's a more modern take on that character, and I miss this where like he could because that's the other thing that we get in that flashback issue that we also get in the origin. Tony Stark was never a bad guy. Unlike the movie, he didn't have a character arc. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
And he's always just been a good guy that wanted to help. He's not a jerk that had to learn a lesson. Tony Stark's just a good guy. It's also why I don't like when we go backwards and make him an alcoholic from the beginning and all of that. But it's just really good, solid, like, superhero comics. Like, I don't think it will, like, change anybody's world. Like, it's not like Dark Knight Returns. It's not even like some of the best bits of Miller's Daredevil. It's just... I don't think we get these kinds of comics anymore where like everyone is trying to be a literary masterpiece or they're just being like silly and weird. The like high quality workman comics don't exist anymore.
Yeah,
people just making good superhero comics.
This is thoughtful about the things it's thoughtful about. The rest of the time it's just being fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun action adventure that is actually thinking about things a little bit. Like
there's room for that.
And it's good for kids.
Yeah.
Like, kids can read this and enjoy it.
Another real quick point...
I can read it and enjoy it.
Another real quick point about the story itself I want to make.
80.
I think we do that a lot, honestly.
Back in my day...
I want to make one more quick point about Scott Lang, because I meant to say this earlier and I didn't.
Yeah.
But I like Ant-Man's presence in this because Tony... has done the thing for someone else that he needs to be done for him, and I think that's really important. I think that's why he's in this story. Is that like Tony helped a guy who was down on his luck and making mistakes and was a criminal, and now Tony's not a criminal, but as an alcoholic, he needs someone to do the same thing for him, and he's not self-aware enough to realize that he's in the same boat, kind of, that Scott Lang was when he came along and helped him.
And while Scott Lang is not as jokey as he will be in the movies, he's still kind of the same guy, right? Like
That's true.
Like he's like, yes sir, Mr. Stark.
Yeah.
Like,
no, he's great.
Although he also doesn't know that he's Iron Man. But
yeah, I don't think anyone does. Isn't that unusual?
Yes.
Does he have...
He has no confidence.
He's got no confidence.
He has no confidence.
I'm not used to that.
Rhodey
Just in
will later
superhero
find out.
stuff in general, nobody knows.
And I think Bethany finds out in this run. And we didn't talk about Bethany very much.
No, we didn't.
She is throughout this run.
Boy, Marvel's obsessed with redheads, yeah?
Yeah. She's a pretty big love interest for Tony Stark. No one will ever know her because she wasn't in a movie.
Yeah.
But
I hadn't heard of her, and I was like, this is the story everybody's heard of, and I don't know who this character is.
Yeah, and she's kind of like the big one. Like, people know Pepper Potts because like, all of the love interests that Stan Lee created.
Oh, so, like, she was, like, the Betty Ross or something?
Well, Pepper Potts is like the Betty Ross.
Right.
Or Pepper Potts is like the Jane Foster.
Okay.
Like, she just disappeared,
Okay.
Nobody used her for a while. Her and Happy Hogan go and get married, and they go off on their own. But, like, this is what we do when we adapt. We just go back to Stan Lee, and whatever the girl was, that's who it is. Whether that character stuck around or not. So, like, Pepper Potts is not the all-looming love interest character for Tony Stark's entire life. Bethany Cape's probably the biggest. He doesn't have a lot of, like, super stable relationships. Kind of every writer brings on their own girlfriend. But, like, Bethany Cape's a big one because this is a big run. And, like, when Mick and Layton come back later and do Iron Man at the end, it's Bethany Cape that he's married to. And Fraction brings her back. Like, she's... Of Tony Stark's love interest, she's maybe the biggest one outside of Pepper Potts. And other writers bring her back. Oh, Miss Argobast is big too. She comes back a couple times. The secretary.
Yeah, I didn't know her either.
Yeah, she's just a snarky old lady, and she Fraction brought her back, and I think she comes back maybe in.
Is she the character that says, "In my day, we didn't do that until we got married, and even then, sometimes not at all"?
Yeah, and it's just them kissing.
Yeah,
it's just them kissing. There's also a weird running joke that doesn't pay off, where twice Tony Stark runs into an old woman. Do you remember that? Like, he's on a plane and he, like, pushes an old woman out of the way, and then when he's in Vegas, he, like, pushes her out of the way, and then we just drop that joke. But I kept waiting for it to come back and finally, like, do something. It does. It just goes away.
Yeah, it would have been great if that just kept happening and like in completely different places.
Yeah, and then you just wait till like assistant editor's month, and you have an issue where she's the villain.
She's just mad at him for pushing her.
Yeah, just got like a big iron suit, and yeah,
Great. Or like you made me lose a fortune in when I was in slot machines.
yeah, and you also pushed me, and she's the one person that knows that Tony Stark is Iron Man, and
That's awesome. Yeah, they should have done that.
they should have done that.
Sorry, real quick. I did a little bit of research, and I was surprised to find that the hermit guy from the island in the Namor issues
Is he in an MCU movie?
never comes back again.
Oh no, yeah.
And I thought maybe you'd do something with him somewhere, because
No. I love that guy's life is just awful, because they blow up the island, he's like, well, I guess I just don't have a home anymore. And he doesn't have money because he's been living on an island for like 3 decades.
yeah, no, it's really sad. But then they're like, oh, we'll get that guy set up somewhere. And I was like, maybe nope, he never does anything.
Actually, about that, this is really minor, but I did want to mention it. There was an inconsistency with that island. Because when they show up on the island and Roxxon is pretending to be the military, it turns out, and there's this old guy who they're like, he just showed up and started like ranting and raving. And you find out that this old guy's actually been living there for like a decade, or maybe longer. Him and his wife didn't want the high-tech life, which is interesting in the Iron Man comic. Yeah. And they went and moved to this remote island. They've lived there, and she died. And he's continued living like they wanted to live, just off the land, like, there's a word to that, but whatever. When they get there, Roxxon says that we've been doing this for like a decade. We've been testing nuclear weapons here. It's a nuclear weapons deposit. And that's the reason it's not on any maps. But then we find out Roxxon's been there for about a week. Why isn't it on any maps?
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
And it's a vibranium deposit, which is a thing that I can now say on video, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
as opposed to 5 years ago, where if I said vibranium deposit, no one would know what I was talking about.
So I guess it's really rare, but not as rare as we thought it was.
Well,
there's like this one other island that has it.
They say this is the only other place on Earth they've ever found vibranium. And there's a great comment about them where
you could have done a cool backstory with that, where like somebody took it, from Wakanda to there, because I think it's kind of odd to have. It sort of makes sense if it's only in one place, but it's a little odd if it's only in 2 places. Like,
there's I guess you could like in Pangea, right? Like it's part of Wakanda that broke off, something like that. But
is it anywhere near Wakanda though? Like, what part of the world are we in?
I have no idea.
I wasn't sure.
But I do love that the Roxxon guys are like, yeah, those guys Wakanda won't give us any. And I was like, that's really funny.
Yep.
And Roxxon, this is right around the big Exxon oil spill, I think, is when Roxxon gets created.
Yep.
I'm not sure how close this is. I don't know if this is the first Roxxon appearance, but if anyone doesn't know that, Roxxon is the Marvel universe of the Exxon company, because Exxon had the huge oil spill.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of real clear on the nose social commentary.
The Magia/Magia, depending on how you pronounce it, that's the Mafia. Like, that was Stan Lee doing the Mafia. That one, for some reason, is less obvious and took me a while to figure out. Like, it is a crime syndicate called the Magia.
Yeah, now that you say it, I feel like an idiot for not thinking of it.
But yeah, it's the Mafia. Because at that point in time, you didn't write Mafia because they would come for you.
Yeah. Wow. Different time, man.
Different time. Better time?
Question mark. Anything else you want to make sure that we say about this?
Actually, there is. There was one other thing that I was going to mention earlier when we were talking about Bob Layton. So, I like the art in this, but Bob Layton is the inker. Bob Layton is a very strong inker, to the point where whoever he inks becomes Bob Layton. So, this is all pretty good artwork. I guarantee you it's not what the page looked like. Because his inks are so strong that,
I thought there were places where it looked too heavy.
When you...
Like, almost too textured.
He makes all other artists look like him. Because he draws too.
Yeah.
When he inks, he makes art look like his art. So if you go through this book, you will see other artists that aren't John Romita Jr., and it's nigh identical.
Interesting.
Because Bob Layton is such an overpowering inker that he inks and makes it look like... That explains where there were
places where I felt like it kind of jumped out at me as John Romita, and other places where it didn't.
Yeah, and there's a couple of those. There's a couple really good... I think this one is great, and this one feels Like that's John Romita Jr. like coming, like you can see him poking through. But I'm interested to know what this really looks like. I wonder what the pencils on this look like, because...
And that Last Fury issue looks different.
And I think that might be a different artist.
Because it's not Romita.
Yeah, but it still looks close. Like, some of the faces are different, but I still feel like or maybe he didn't ink this one.
I don't think he inked that one. That's the point I'm making.
Yes, you're right. He didn't ink that one. And Roger Stern was editor. That's interesting.
Can you see how it's a little flatter?
Yeah.
It's a little bit more, I don't want to say cartoony, but like it's not as...
There's also some Kirby in the faces.
Yeah.
That eye's not where that should be. But no. I want what the pencils on this look like, because I've always gone back to the stuff.
That moment where he goes, "I can't believe my eye."
Yep. I love the Nick Fury in this. I love the whole. Look, I'm real sorry. Like, I hope we can still be friends, but my number one concern is like our safety, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Or like, they're not throwing him under the bus, but he's. You know what I mean? Like,
he's got his priorities.
Yeah, and like. He's not wrong, but he is wrong.
Yeah.
Like I like that.
Nice and complicated.
But whenever I've gone back to this, I've been like, man, this just doesn't look like John Romita Jr. And I'm like, man, he really found himself later. Because when you go to early Frank Miller, it looks more like comic booky, but like you can see it. Frank Miller's lips are very distinct.
Yeah.
So like this looks like a regular comic book, but with Frank Miller lips. This doesn't look like Rob Downey Jr. John Romita Jr. And then once I realized, I'm like, oh, it's because Layton's a really strong inker.
So you're saying it's not even necessarily as much about Romita's evolution as an artist?
I want to see what the pencils look like. I want to see if they look more like... If you can see more signs of who he'll become as an artist later.
I wonder if there's any black and white reprints of that.
I'm sure they got this stuff in the Essentials.
I was going to say Essentials, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Then you'd know.
But it's still got
inks.
inks.
No, it would still be the inks. Yeah, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd ever be able to just look at the pencils.
But yeah. So like overall, what did you think of finally reading Demon in the Bottle?
It's historically, obviously, I learned a lot, and like I'm really glad I read it, and it was decently compelling enough. But now that I hear you talk about what comes after it, I want to read that stuff more. Bits of it were a slog for me, but the actual alcohol issue is quintessential.
There's one in the O'Neill run where it's Tony Stark because he's drunk and on the street at this point because he has lost Stark International to Obadiah Stane. Like, he has lost everything, and Rhodey's running around as Iron Man, and Tony Stark is drunk and on the street, and his moment of clarity. Because that's the thing alcoholics talk about. It's like the moment when you realize it's your moment of clarity. It's a blizzard, and he huddles together with a pregnant homeless woman on like the steps of a building, and she dies in the blizzard. And that's when he's like, I have a problem, and I need to get sober.
That's amazing.
Yeah. His run is great. It's 50 issues. That was a weird thing where like this run is 50 issues.
It probably doesn't do as much silly superhero stuff, I bet.
There's some silly superhero stuff. There's a point where Tony puts together a costume from other people's he goes to the Lost and Found box at the Avengers Mansion because he doesn't have his armor, and he's just like, well, I've got my rocket boots, I've got Ant-Man's helmet, and I've got this cape from there's some and Obadiah Stane's got a diamond in his head for a while, and he just stops having that. And his minions are the chessmen. No, it's still because he plays chess. He's a chess master, so his minions are the chessmen. They're all modeled after chess pieces. Although the chess thing actually works really well in that.
Okay, that's pretty great.
But no, it's still quite silly comic book stuff, but it's really good. Dennis O'Neill's just a really good writer. But yeah, no, I do recommend the entire run of McLean Layton. It's just I wasn't there for it, so I can't be as in awe of, oh my god, Iron Man's finally right. This is good, solid comics, but I do think some of the later stuff is a little bit better. And I remember liking their second run better, but I have not read that in about a decade. So I can't speak to that for sure, but I remember liking their second one a little bit better. And then there's just good Iron Man comics. You should read it. I would recommend if you're reading on Marvel Unlimited, start at the beginning of their run, which is 116, and read to 29. Just because that's where Bethany Cave is introduced, and some of that it's just a fuller read. You don't have to, but if you're going to, it's just a fuller read.
I may try the O'Neill run at some point.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm certainly curious about that.
It's great.
Well, thanks to the Day Ghost for requesting this.
And that's where the silver armor comes from.
Oh.
That's where he first gets that. Is at the very end, issue 200. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
I don't get to talk about Iron Man that much.
No, you don't. That's true. After a while, I was just like, oh, Eric's going to talk about Iron Man. I'm just going to sit back and listen to Eric talk about Iron Man. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Sure appreciate it. And leave your comments if you've read this run, and tell us what you think of Demon in the Bottle. Demon in a Bottle. It's Demon in a Bottle. Finally, we did this. I can't even believe it, because
we just have to do Green Arrow Year One. That's the other.
Forever.
That's the other one that's been on.
That goes back forever and ever.
Yeah, because that was we were going to do that because we did Longbow Hunters for season 1. We were going to do Year 1 before season 2 of Arrow dropped.
Yeah, and then 3 wasn't good, and then we were like, you know what? We're kind of done with this Arrow thing.
Yeah.
And then there's other runs and things we've always wanted to do, but you're right. Those were the two big things we were like, this is a one and done, easy to sit down and do, and we've never done it. Yeah. So, well, congrats to us. We got that done. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you again next time on Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
Happy reading, folks.